All right, guys, welcome back to Decoding Babylon. Once again, I'm JT, and this is
Brian,
my boy Brian, Demon Racers. And today we're going to talk about the origins of ufology.
UFOlogy.
Yes,
All right.
sir. So
Yeah,
Brian,
so
Brian, why don't you take it away and tell us
hmm,
why do we think that there's crazy beings from outer
hmm.
space, flying saucers, and the whole nine?
Yeah, so it's a very convoluted subject, but really what we need to do is get down to when it started. And I think when
Mm-hmm.
it started can give us a good clear perspective of exactly what it is that we are experiencing in the world today. And so one of the origins of the UFO phenomenon started shortly after World War II. There was some stuff. I think there was a few little things that people talked about seeing things in the sky and stuff like that. And there was like old drawings or paintings that people like to try to point out and go, "Oh, it's a UFO right there," and blah blah blah. But the real phenomenon that we kind of see sprouting in our society today, it started right after the German soldiers from the 30s that we don't talk about.
Operation
Um,
Paperclip.
Operation Paperclip, yeah. It started with them, okay? And so what we can one of the base things that we can kind of pull from this is that there was a lot of information if you start digging and stories about people connecting ufology to the Nazis. We're gonna say it. We're gonna have to say this name a lot, actually. So
Yeah.
to the Nazis, there's a lot of information connecting to them, and when you start looking into it, it's kind of overwhelming. And the theory that I kind of have come to realize is that the Hitler wasn't just trying to, let's say, kill people for the sake of killing people because he thought they were evil. People don't know this. They don't study history. Okay, Hitler believed in an Aryan race, which Aryans aren't even like from the region. They're from India. Actually, the Aryan race is
Yes,
the Indian.
it's more of like a Tibetan thing, and also
Yeah.
like a Hindu idea.
Hmm.
But
And
it was
so it
actually,
was
but
a
it was, but it was actually a real people. There is actually real historic people called the Aryans, and I think most people don't realize that. They think it's an imaginary thing that these races came up with, just blonde-haired, blue-eyed people like Dolph Lundgren from like Rocky
yeah,
Four.
yeah. And people don't know, and it was connected to Thor,
Mm-hmm.
interestingly, and the Norse gods as well. And Heinrich Hitler was one of Hitler's right hand men, who was
Mm-hmm.
actually a part of the propaganda with all this kind of stuff, and he was looking into occult sciences. And the Nazis were purveyors of ancient history. I mean, a lot of people like seem to write this part off, but they actually wanted to collect, not just killing people. They weren't just there killing; they were collecting information like and ancient runes. Like, and I think we talked about that previously in the show where they collect like the gates of Babylon and all that other stuff, right? And so they were trying to bring about a race of people. If you read what Heinrich Himmler actually believed, he believed in a society of giants and dwarves and elves. This is what he believed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he believed in this type of technology and that they were trying to resurrect that race, the race of giants,
Mm-hmm.
which probably means Nephilim,
Yeah.
if you haven't gotten
Yeah.
with the picture yet.
Yeah.
The race of Nephilim that they were trying to bring back to life and study it and gain technology and understanding. And they also studied a lot of human sacrifices. That's why all the Nazi skull rings, they all have skulls on them and they all represent death. And the symbology that's used is all connected to Hinduism and death and Taoism and all these other ancient religions. They were pulling all the religious things together to try to find a religious truth. And the truth that they seem to have come to was that sacrificing people gave them information. It's the same truth that you see perpetuated in the Aztec culture, the Babylonian culture, the Roman culture. It was sacrifice
even
people
even in
to the gods.
even in Judah and Israel. Like obviously
Yep.
by the time that God sent Nebuchadnezzar in to destroy Judah and Jerusalem, they were doing the same things. They were sacrificing
Yep.
their sons and daughters to Moloch.
That's what it is. And they came to the understanding that you sacrifice people and you to the gods and you get information. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
what is that information that they received? And this is the interesting part. People don't know the word Holocaust doesn't mean a horrible time in biblical or in history. Okay. The word Holocaust by definition means a Jewish sacrifice.
Yeah, burnt on an altar or something like that.
Yeah, a burnt offering on an altar. That should change your perspective completely of what the Holocaust actually was. It wasn't just a time where they murdered people. No, these people were sacrificed.
Well, I think it's
sacrificed.
I think it's important to like to say like that this is obviously in no way trying to say, oh gosh, they weren't racist. So this is worse.
Oh,
obviously.
sure. Yeah, worse is worse. Yes,
this is obviously worse. But it's like that. It's like it's one thing where like I feel like that sometimes people, again, we were talking about Kanye one day. We're like, people just say Kanye's crazy, so then you don't have to think anymore about it. Okay, so Adolf Hitler was crazy. Oh, the Nazis were just crazy, or they were just evil. And it's like they still had a thought process that they were doing things. And obviously, these people were very like the Germans are very like they have a regimen of things they do. So obviously, they weren't just doing these things because they were crazy. They were doing these things because it was a means to an end. And I actually misspoke in that episode when we were talking about Operation Paperclip. I said that Heinrich Himmler, they found 10,000 occult books. It was 13,000.
Really?
It was 13. So you can imagine what these books say. And obviously, if we go back to like somebody like a Lester Crowley, where he's saying like to contact these entities, it requires blood.
Yep, sacrifice.
And obviously, to the more you're trying to seek, obviously the higher level of sacrifice it requires. So again, like then you read these things back into history, and you're saying like, oh, is that why the death was on such a massive scale and it was so brutal and it was so horrible? Is it because again, look who they're trying to contact?
Yep. They were trying to contact somebody. And just like the Aztecs, they sacrificed people to get their perfect calendar. You can see it in their ancient writings. You'll see the Aztecs murdering people and the gods show up and then they give them this like present and they're all like, oh, and it's like they gave them information. Okay. And you can see that in their hieroglyphics. And you can see this in even Egyptian hieroglyphic stuff related to it. And you're like, okay, sacrifice equals knowledge. Okay. And that's kind of what's been perpetuated. So he took that to the extreme. And then there's this thing called the Nazi bell. Now, we don't know exactly how valid some of the stories of the Nazi bell are, but apparently some of the technology that they learned, we know that they learned rocket technology. Okay, they developed it, or did they sacrifice to get that understanding of that technology? Here's the thing. We don't know. Like, we don't know exactly what they did because they didn't obviously reveal it to us, but we do know that we've got the Werner von Braun, who was a Nazi scientist, was involved in the sacrificing of people, suddenly has this understanding of rocket technology beyond what everybody else knew. Okay. Yeah. Beyond what everybody else understood. And when Hitler lost the war, they took that knowledge and they hired Werner von Braun to develop NASA. Okay. And the Saturn V rocket, and the first rocket that went, took us to Apollo, to the Apollo 11, took us to the moon. And so like this knowledge came from some occult understanding that the Nazis were working with. That's why they didn't kill the Nazis, the scientists that were at the TED. They didn't kill them, guys. They hired them under Operation Paperclip because they had understanding that they gained from something. And this was about the time where supposedly Hitler killed himself, even though they never found the body. People don't know this, but they never found Hitler's body.
Well, what's also interesting is that they actually did find a body, and I saw this video, and I couldn't find the video of it, but I remember seeing this on one of these old World War II shows. There was a body, and it was like they were dragging this thing through the streets, and it was on this pile of like obviously rubble, and it was like, but you could, if you looked closely, it was not him. And so
they checked the teeth records and they realized it wasn't him at all.
But it was a guy with a little funny mustache, and he had the hair, and it was like it looked like, and you're like, okay, so he had at least one double. Obviously, these guys are not stupid, so it's kind of like, how many more doubles did he have? And so obviously, it it is interesting when you realize, like, okay, so what body did they find? Supposedly, Eva Braun and him like both killed themselves, and then they were both asked to be burned, be
Yeah,
stuck in
right.
some ditch and be burned. And guess what? Guess what? Did we find the body? No, we actually didn't find the body. Supposedly, the Soviets did. The Soviets had some kind of bone or something like that, which obviously, guys, nobody trusts the Soviets. The CIA
Yeah,
did not trust the Soviets. And obviously, there's shows like on the History Channel of like finding Hitler. I mean, there's like a series called Finding Hitler because the CIA did not believe he was dead. I mean, that's I mean, like they didn't trust the news that said he was dead. So I mean, that's all I got to say.
And in fact, they actually went out a second time and looked and raided another location after they supposedly killed Hitler and he was dead. And they found another double. So a second double, a person that wasn't Hitler, that looked like Hitler, that was burned. Half of his face was burned to try to make it look like Hitler, who was killed. They found a second double. Okay, so it's like, why would you even have a second double hiding in a hideout if you weren't trying to secondarily and convince people, like, again, oh, this was Hitler, and they checked the teeth records again and realized, nope, it wasn't Hitler for a second time. So they just kind of gave up and realized, okay, well, Hitler's dead. For some reason, we stopped the search. We just presumed he was dead because the dismantling of the Nazi party began, which we assumed was the dismantling of this, but really it was the acquiescence of the Nazi party, because the second in command Hitler party member actually developed the model for what we now call the UN. The United Nations model was the exact model that Hitler had for his unified Germany model of the unified areas. So it's like, why does that the exact model as the UN? And why was it developed by the same guy who was also a Nazi? Again, Operation Paperclip spread these people out into different parts of government in the United States and other parts. But here's where it gets really weird and interesting. It's almost like the Nazi Bell technology and all that information of them building UFO crafts and all that stuff, it kind of just dissipated. It disappeared and it stopped showing up. Okay. And then
did it got labeled something else.
Or did it get oppressed on purpose? You know, like is it possible that Hitler maybe got the information he was seeking, which was some type of UFO technology, to be able to teleport, move, and maybe he just took a visit to the White House and said, hey, listen, I can destroy you all. Look what I have. You will do what I say that we die, the Nazis are done and the war is over. Hire all my scientists into your government and to other positions of authority, or we kill you. You know, and like it's possible that he may have done this because, I know this sounds ridiculous, but there was this theory that the Germans, the Nazis, actually went to Antarctica, okay, and in South America. Okay, in South America, it's the closest.
Admiral Byrd claimed to have seen Nazi spaceships in a giant hole in the earth in Antarctica.
Who knows?
Yeah, like, it's strange. It's strange, yeah.
But this is where a lot of ufology takes off, guys, and this is where, you know, and you have to understand this because it's connected. But the ufology, so in Australia, what's the country? I forget. I always forget it. Next to Australia, the little
Tasmania.
So in Tasmania, this is where some of the ufology stuff started. And there was a ufology research development center that popped up, okay, close to Antarctica, close to the South Pole and whatever. And all these letters started going out as ufologists trying to seek information. Well, these ufologists, they turn out have like hidden codes for Nazi symbolism in these letters. And there's a name for the letters. I forget what it is, but you can look up the letters in Australia and all this stuff related to ufology in the beginning. And so these letters went out and they had hidden Nazi code written into them. And they were talking about is people wanting to find people that know about UFOs and all this stuff. And then people started seeing these UFOs show up. This experience of UFOs started appearing over Australia and over parts in South America. There was reports, and then it got all the way to the United States. And then we started seeing UFO technology, unknown, hyper advanced technology, making appearances all over the world, all over the United States, all over everywhere. Okay. And it's being recorded and it's being shown. And there was even that incident that happened where the UFOs, the red lights that showed up over the White House,
Yeah,
And
they were saying they were in Luftwaffe, which is the German Air Force, basically formation.
interesting, right? And so these red lights appear over the White House, this UFO experience, and you can research it. It was a thing that actually happened, and they've got photos of it or whatever, and so you can see them.
Didn't somebody say, and of course this escapes me a little bit, that there was some kind of treaty being signed about them testing, like didn't Admiral Byrd wanted them to test nuclear bombs in Antarctica, test them, and it was like some kind of thing that Congress was working on, and supposedly this is the story I heard, was that these Luftwaffe looking spaceships showed up in formation, and it was like all of a sudden this bill did not pass, and they never tested the bombs there.
Yeah, they're like, could it have been that maybe the Nazis that went hiding in Antarctica, said, hey, we're going to pay a visit and show you what's up. Y'all shut your mouth. Don't be doing that kind of foolishness, or we'll destroy you again.
Well,
Keep living your little world that you're living.
There is insane conspiracy, and there obviously, and these are conspiracies theories. Like, these are theories, guys. So like, we're not. We don't know. I'm not trying to. This is true. We don't know. We don't know how many. We haven't verified this. We haven't. We have. Brian and I have not got the budget yet to do a live show from Antarctica yet. But no. So supposedly, like, people talk about like Eisenhower making deals with the people,
aliens,
like, like the aliens at Antarctica. I mean, like, this is insane, obviously, but like, this is what people say. I'm just the messenger. Just relax, guys.
And the thing is, it's like there is evidentiary components to some of these stories, because people that are valid people like Admiral Burrow that are talking about some of these things, that it's like either we have a string of people that are just going crazy and speaking obscenities that are coherent somehow and lining up, or maybe some of what they're saying is true. Maybe some of it's false information. Maybe some of it is to distract you, but maybe some of it seems to be like it could be what it is. And there is a woman that goes on Joe Rogan, and she talks about interviewing one of the NASA scientists, and he admits that they created the UFO Roswell experience. And if you read her book, I forget the name, but if you can type in UFO woman researcher Joe Rogan interviews NASA scientists. Anyways, she interviews them, and she basically comes to the conclusion, like, the guy breaks down, who's a NASA scientist, that admits that they were creating, supposedly at NASA, taking special ed people and doing experiments on these special ed children, and they put them inside of a supposed spaceship looking thing that they created, and they flew up in the outer space and then launched it and dropped it as a distractionary thing to create the whole Roswell experience. And it's really, they were just humans that they had experimented on. And this is actually one of the conclusions that he came to, that he admits to. It's pretty dark and it's pretty disturbing. And when you read her book, she has a book about it, interviewing this NASA scientist before he died. And she goes and interviews a bunch of other people. It's kind of interesting. It could be, again, false flag information. It could be distractions from you believing what was really going on. But it seems like a lot of UFOlogy is connected to deception and to Nazis, guys. It's connected to Nazis. The origin of it is.
Well, I think before we even if you go further back, I would say that the one thing when I was doing a little research before we did this show was that, like, before like the 30s, I think maybe the first thing they might have, I think War of the Worlds was a book written in 1898, and obviously it wasn't popularized until like Orson Welles did the famous radio show. But like there was like comic serials like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers and this kind of stuff. But it was like, it's hard for us to like imagine a time where all of the science fiction wasn't just like inundated in our culture, where it's like the idea of aliens from other planets is not so far-fetched to us anymore, because we see it on the TV, we see it in the movies, we see it in the comic books so often. So now you have a reference point. If you see a weird thing in the sky, you would say, hey, maybe that's a spaceship, maybe that's an alien. When obviously, say 200 years ago, they'd be like, that might have been an angel.
An angel.
That was a demon. That was a demon. That was what was that? They would associate it with spiritual things, and that's why like that we tried to think of mechanical things because we're shown like spaceships and all the nine, which is interesting when you go forward. Like, is it possible that this was getting put out there on purpose when you have like the Lester Crowleys of the world saying, hey, right now they call them angels and demons. One day they're going to call them something else. And then obviously he draws this picture of this being called Lamb, looks just like a gray alien. Yeah, coincidence. And then so now everything is an alien from outer space. It's everything's from different planets and all this, every which way. So now you go to Operation Paperclip. These Nazi scientists come here. Back in World War II, our GIs, our Air Force, were talking about Foo Fighters, balls of light, weird crafts they couldn't explain. Well, guess what? We never got any explanations what they were. It was just like, well, we don't know what they were. And so now, if you think about it, it's almost the perfect cover. And I'll take credit for this. I was listening to Michael Heiser, obviously with God now, or it's sleeping, however you want to say it biblically. He was talking about like the Roswell incident. Eventually there was like an anniversary of this thing. And he was talking about basically like they had a commander in the Air Force or something like that. And he was basically talking about this incident. And long story short, he was giving some hints like that there was some validity to the alien thing. And so Michael Heiser's not stupid. So he was like, hey, it's almost like he wants it to be a story like that people still think aliens exist. And he was like, you know what? It's the perfect cover if you're testing strange aircraft that if people think it's a UFO, 90% of the people don't believe in that sort of thing. So immediately they won't care anymore. And it's like it literally is the perfect cover where it's like if the Air Force had this new flying saucer deal, if somebody said, hey, guys, I saw this flying saucer, and then everyone would be like, is this guy off his meds? Like, you know what I mean? Like it will be dismissed immediately by most of the people. And it's like, so it's actually the perfect cover of like, if they all of a sudden got Nazi tech, and they continue to progress that forward, they're just allowed to be, it's the Roswell thing could almost be covered for, hey, we're going to do more of this. And we want it to be the crazies who actually pay attention to this and not the normal people who are, doing the 9-to-5 jobs and commuting and going to T-ball practice and all this kind of, they don't care about it because they don't believe in it.
Yeah. And the more deception that they put out in the world, the more people are lured into lying, and it like deception breeds deception. I don't know if you ever thought about that, but like if there is lies being told all around you, then pretty soon like lying becomes the norm. Okay. And so there's a lot of deception going on that kind of created even more unknown and more lies. So it's just a piled on experience in a lot of ways, and when you don't know the truth, so they're hiding something, and the something has created a problem. Okay, so like I like to think that people back in the day probably were more truthful, and like if you had seen something in the sky, you would genuinely be like I saw a thing in the sky. But now it's like now people talk about it and it's like, well, maybe you're crazy, and now it's like it's like this questionable area because we just don't think that that's real, and we don't trust one another.
Well, there's so many people, and of course, or at least is the way they've been presented to us for so many years, that if you say you've seen a UFO, you're written off as crazy. Obviously, we do know, everybody's known people like this that seek attention. So they might say a thing in order to get attention. But obviously, the way I think of it about like this is kind of like if somebody I knew said they saw Bigfoot. Okay, so what did you think of this person before? Did they ever just talk nonsense before? Did they ever did they have a decent reputation? Because it's almost when you really think about it. I joked one time when I was saying I don't want to really see Bigfoot because enough people already think I'm crazy. So if I started telling people, they would be like, "Oh gosh, I told you he was crazy," or I could keep it to myself. So it's kind of like, what do I have to gain by that? Because obviously I don't really, to me, I don't feel it as it would be a positive thing. And so Michael Heiser, again, he was talking about going to these UFO places or these kind of Bigfoot events. And it'd be like, he said there'd be like doctors, there'd be like lawyers and people with like decent reputation. They can't tell anyone else because people will think they're insane.
Yeah.
So those kind of people don't really have any real motive to lie.
Yeah.
And I think overall that's why you have to judge these things case by case. But you know, the one thing he said is like, if you think about it, so if you don't believe in Bigfoot, you don't believe in these things. Well, let's say 99% of the people are lying. Well, if 1%'s telling the truth, well, then it's real.
Yeah, there's still something there.
Then the whole thing is real. And so, like, I think overall, it's like when you say you saw a UFO, really understand that UFO says unidentified flying object. It does not mean it's from Mars. It does not mean it's from Uranus. It does not mean it's from some other place. It just means you can't identify a thing that you saw. Obviously, UFOs exist. Full stop. UFOs exist. Things that we can't identify in the sky. Now, are they aliens? Brian and I do not believe in aliens like you see on TV. We do believe in things that are not from Earth that could be here, because obviously the sons of God that shouted for joy when God laid the foundations of the earth, they were someplace besides the earth because they were shouting for joy. They weren't here.
Yeah.
So there are things, there are beings that have been around before the earth, so they're not from Earth. So technically, guys, they're extraterrestrials.
They're aliens.
They're extraterrestrials. It's crazy.
And it's interesting because you say like the you know, when you think about like people's perspective, like when it comes to like their understanding of what something actually is, like if you were to say you saw Bigfoot, again, you'd sound like you were crazy, but like maybe Bigfoot isn't what you think it is. Yeah. Maybe Bigfoot is just a shadow of a thing. Okay. And because we've given this like audacious little description or ridiculous scenario, we've all associated every big, giant, shadowy black thing as being Bigfoot. But what if some of those big, giant, shadowy things aren't? What if they're like looking monster things? You know, what if they totally look different than what Bigfoot is, but you just still see the shadow? So in the same sense, when we look at UFOs and things flying in the air, who's to say that these are always mechanical? Who's to say these aren't metaphysical? Who's to say these aren't angels or spiritual? Or we just don't know. But we do know that there is some level of physical nature to some of these things, but they also disappear into mountains. They disappear into water. They disappear into walls. They defy physics completely and entirely, yet they can be picked up on physical instruments of reading because we've caught them on airplane scanners and such. But but the reality is like we don't exactly know what UFOlogy, you know, origins, what these things are, but they are something. There is something there.
There's a somewhat of a consistency to the descriptions of these things, and we don't know if that's like the core, you know, like the context that we have. And I think that's what you're saying. It's like that. How can we escape? So if you're in the woods, and you saw some big thing, your mind would automatically say, "Is that Bigfoot?" Because it's like because we've been told that Bigfoot is this big thing that lives in the woods. When like if you had no concept of what that was, you would like maybe you would you have a slightly different description because you're trying to conceptualize it, how your brain can what you've heard, any kind of context that you actually have without knowing it. So it's like, so obviously what you really say is I saw something I can't explain, and then you maybe try to explain it in a way that some will understand what you're saying. I mean, that's probably the best way to say it. Like that. The point is, I think that I don't believe obviously everything that anyone saw, everything everybody put on TikTok, every weird thing they've seen in the sky. But when I see people, and I think you can just generally tell the genuineness of certain, they saw something. Like most of these people, I believe, did see something.
They just don't know what it is.
Now again, it's like, here's when you get into like the spiritual aspects. I think that one of the more interesting parts of like alien encounters, alien abduction encounters, these people generally had some kind of like connection with like Ouija boards. They're messing around with spiritual things. And now it's all of a sudden they have these sleep paralysis, these beings come into the room and like, hey, this is like, obviously Brian and I are like, we're not a mode where like, that's a weird coincidence that they were experimenting with the occult and all of a sudden they got abducted by aliens and they lost like 2 days and they don't remember what happened. Like that, to me, that seems pretty clear. That's demonic.
That's a very very common phenomenon. Like most
Mm,
people that have had supernatural experiences, like will report that their family was either in the occult or they were involved in witchcraft or they did it or they were doing it. Like that's so common across the board. People that have had the supernatural alien abduction encounters, it starts always with high strangeness of the occult and witchcraft and Ouija boards and demons and spirits and contacting the dead, and that's how it always starts. It always,
mm.
almost in almost every case, if it's not them, someone in their family had done it. And there talks about in the Bible that the sins of the father can go to the third and fourth generation. So it's
Mhm.
very possible that maybe you didn't play with the Ouija board, but your grandpa did, and now guess what? You got aliens visiting you. Okay, and
Right,
like
right.
aliens. Okay,
Yeah.
again,
Mhm.
and like we said, like when it comes to what aliens actually are in UFO, like Aleister Crowley like conjured the spirit lamb, and if you look
Yeah.
up lamb, it's definitely an alien.
If
Or
you
we
s-
can talk about
if somebody saw that thing today,
yeah, yeah,
there's almost like 100% certainty, unless they knew exactly like
yes,
Lester Crowley, they would say it would look like one of those gray aliens, a
they would
gray
call
alien
it an
ship.
alien. Yep.
Yeah, it would. But yeah, no doubt.
And when you look into the beginnings, also further connected to Aleister Crowley, one of his proteges or connected, people that followed after him is Jack Parsons, JPL Laboratory, the guy who helped create some of the rocket technology that NASA uses. Let alone to mention Nasa is the Hebrew word for deceive, which you actually, if you read it in Hebrew in the Bible, it says the Eve was Nasa by the serpent. So Nisa was to beguile or to deceive, and so she was deceived by she was Nisad by the serpent. So that's what the NASA word even like kind of synonymously lines up in such an unusual way. But it's funny because it's a Hebrew word, but yet NASA was also heavily influenced and developed by German Nazis who hated the Jews, right? So it's like who would ever put
Yeah,
those two things together? And then you see these connecting threads, and then you see that the people that are involved in it, like like what's his name, Warner von
Werner.
Braun,
Yeah, Werner von Braun. Yeah,
is also involved in related occult science, and so is Jack Parsons, again also related in occult science. And
yeah.
so there's this connection with occult science, UFOs, technology, aliens, all of it. And Jack Parsons wrote a book called Sex and Rockets. You can look it up now. It's the occult world of Jack Parsons and
And what was he
rocket
trying?
technology.
And what was he trying? He was trying to conjure a being through a portal, and like I think it was in
Yep,
California,
with L. Ron Hubbard.
called the Whore of Babylon. So
Yeah,
obviously, think Book of Revelation.
yeah,
Yeah, that Whore of Babylon. Like that's
yep.
what they were trying to do. So it's like Jack Parsons has a crazy story. And I got to go on my little tangent with Jack Parsons. This was one of those things I was going to make a video. I never did because I just didn't know how to say it other than this was that when we say things are all connected, guys, they're all connected. Like this stuff isn't so
Mm-hmm.
insane. So Jack Parsons, if you guys go ahead and look up a picture of him, he looks just like Tony Stark's dad. Tony Stark, as in Iron Man. So in the comic books, the Marvel comic books, Howard Stark, Tony
Mm-hmm.
Stark's dad, a guy from the 30s. He's got this kind of pencil thin mustache, slick back hair, suit, just like you'd expect a guy from the 30s or 40s. And so this guy happens to be like a genius, a super genius in rockets and every other thing. So it just so happens Jack Parsons obviously looks just like that. This guy has no formal training in like any kind of real science, but he just so happens to be like starts JPL, this rocket technology. First of all, obviously rocket science didn't really exist back then, but for some reason he became a rocket scientist with no formal training. Interesting, right? Well, so anyways, so the Marvel connection is fascinating where Jack Parsons' real name isn't Jack Parsons. His dad was named Marvel Parsons. And so it turns out that Jack Parsons' dad was not such a nice guy. He was a philanderer. But he was named after his dad. So Jack Parsons' first name is actually Marvel.
Marvel.
Marvel Parsons, and his mom, obviously, as his dad was a scumbag, changed his name to Jack. And so it's
Wow.
like, so this guy just so happens to look exactly like this famous Marvel character's dad, and that's what his name is, Marvel. Does anyone
Wow.
think that that's a coincidence? No
I mean,
chance.
yeah, Marvel. I mean, it's funny. It's ironic that it's called Marvel, and they've like drawn from the origins of this. Like everything about Marvel, it connects in so many ways to the occult that you just
Mhm.
couldn't even begin to start. That's like a whole other episode we'll have to do on its own. But like, you know, the universe 616 even, and all
Yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff which relates to the mark of the beast. And there's so many components about these things that relate all back to this occult knowledge and understanding, guys. And this is the mystery schools, the mystery knowledge. It's hidden within the media and the stuff that's around you all the time.
Yeah,
But like,
and Jack Parsons was a big comic book guy. Actually, if you look into it, it's like this guy Jack Parsons was a big comic book fan, and when you think of like devil worship, you don't like a lot of times you think of like the Baphomet and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that wasn't involved, but if you look at the early accounts of Jack Parsons, he was doing rituals to the sun. Once again, you look at these ancient cultures and they all worship the sun god. Well, guess what the space program's named after?
Apollo.
Apollo. So Apollo 11, again, 11, the magic number from Aleister Crowley, just
Yeah.
so happens to be the mission that gets to the moon. Guys, they worship. NASA was started by Nazis. The rocket
Studying the
program
occult.
their rocket program was heavily influenced by a literal Satanist, and I say that in every with no hesitation, like an actual Satanist, like black pentagrams, blood sacrifice, everything. And then I said, obviously, their head guy was Werner von Braun, like literally ran a concentration camp.
Yep. I don't think you can deny like at this point, like anybody that's like, hey, I love NASA. NASA's for science. It's like, dude, look up the facts, bro. Like you're part of a cult. You're part of a cult.
And it's kind of like, and it's again, like some people obviously in the comment section will say, well, why would they lie about that? Why wouldn't they lie? Yeah. It was funny because I joke with my dad because obviously he grew up in the age. He's a boomer, so obviously the boomers are all about the space program. 1969, when they went to the moon, was a big day for them. And I said, well, why don't you think they can go back? Because I said, I'll give you two options. You can say, well, either they can't go back because they don't have the right Nazis or Satanists to get them there, or they never went in the first place and they faked the whole thing. And I'm like, that's to me, that's the two options. You got to go with one or the other one. I think either one's possible, but I think it's more likely the latter, is that they deceive people. But once again, like the science in the magic mix, and it's like, what are they really trying to do? I think ultimately the idea of aliens, outer space, like spaceships, visiting other planets, all these kind of things. I do believe this is a deception in order to deceive you one day for like big time. Again, like, is it possible that these are the signs and lying wonders that Jesus was talking about? Because it's like,
it says
really
there will be signs in the sky.
Yeah, it's because it really is. It's like that this is, when they talk about this is one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Like, is this the idea of like that we're becoming a god? It's a leap forward in as far as like, we can go to the moon, we can do anything, we can be as gods. And it's like, I think that the people who are in the room, I think that that's what they want people to say. There's nothing that we can't do now because we
like
could
the Tower of Babel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
There's nothing we can't do. They achieve everything. But yeah, that's, I mean, like, and one more thing to point out, I think that is interesting is when it comes to UFO experiences, a lot of people that have encounters with aliens, ironically, it's the same thing. The same experiences that people that have encounters with demons have. And in fact, there's a book on how to fight UFO abductions. And one of the 10 most listed ways, one of the 10 listed ways is to say the name of Jesus. Why would aliens respond to the authority of your Jesus from your planet if these things weren't from this planet or from this world? It's ironic that this has like been a repeated thing on people that are dealing with abductions from aliens. They've called out the name Jesus and the abduction stops or the experience ends. And so it's always demonically connected. Aliens, demon experiences are like woven in one. And there's even what's that Skinwalker Ranch experience where people were talking about that kind of stuff. And that whole experience our government stopped the experiments that were happening at Skimrocker Ranch, and the reason why our government stopped it was because there was, for those that don't know, Skinwalker Ranch was this place where there was a high amount of supernatural activity. But our government said we do not want to be involved in the public knowing that we are studying potential gateways to hell. This is why our government stopped it, because they thought that the public would find out about Skinwalker Ranch and assume that it was a gateway to hell and that it would look bad on our U.S. government. So we supposedly stopped the studies. But you know how that goes.
They didn't stop doing anything.
They didn't stop it at all.
No, but it is interesting.
It.
It is interesting when if you look in like I read, if you guys have read the Wisdom of Solomon, obviously I'm not going to, it's apocrypha, and it's like I'm not going to say this is totally legit, but it is interesting some of the ideas where, again, the Bible associates the angels with stars, whether they're literally actually stars or they're just associated with them. But in the book of the Wisdom of Solomon, it talks about these demons who are obviously their fathers are the stars, the angels at some point. And they were even talking about the demons being shooting stars, and that's why they don't stay up there. They can go visit basically, but they can't last. That's what the book of Solomon saying, or the Wisdom of Solomon. And so it's interesting. I find that like when you think about things from the stars, obviously, so with the context, like I said, the culture has pumped into your brain that the things from the stars are aliens. Well, like I said, they're not from Earth, but they're not really like, they ain't ET either. They're angels, they're fallen angels, perhaps. And it is interesting. That does make sense where it's like you'd have the same kind of connection where these things came from up there and then they're here, but they still submit to the name of Jesus. To the name of Jesus is the most powerful name. Every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So it's like, so that's where I kind of leave at the end of this, where I always think like, we get things so twisted sometimes where it's like we get into debates about like how much of the stuff is true, how much is not. Where it's like, obviously, I said all I can really do is in a world full of all these lies, I believe the Bible. So I know there's the heavens and then there's the earth, and I know that God is above the highest of the heavens, and then all the things are under him. So obviously they submit to him. And so like when I really think about it at this point, like all I really know is obviously we know the Bible doesn't tell. It's not a book. If it told you everything, obviously it would be a book that you couldn't read. It would be too long. So it tells you enough to know that like certain things are meant to deceive you. Some things are definitely true. Some things obviously could be true, but it is interesting like that I don't worry about alien threats because I know that one day Jesus is going to come back from the heavens as well. But it's also interesting that like, again, when you're saying like, where are they coming from? They might not be coming from the heavens, because we do know that some of them are stuck down in the earth. And it's like, now it's interesting how the debate about aliens has shifted between, are they from other planets or are they interdimensional? They're other dimensions. And it's like, so what dimension are they talking about? Are they talking about a dimension under the earth that you couldn't see?
Dimension?
Could it be somewhere in the sea? Obviously, there's a lot of things about the marine kingdom and like the evil spirits that are in the water. It's like, guys, all we really know is these things are not of God. Then I think that's pretty much all you can really say. And again, like the name of Jesus, they all have to submit to him at some point.
And so now what's interesting is that we see this UFO phenomenon like so prominent in our society today that it's leading us somewhere. It seems to be leading us somewhere. We had that UFO experience that happened over in Vegas. And in Vegas, it was supposedly a giant craft that crashed, and the beings that came out of it were also 8 or 10 foot tall. Again, Nephilim, probably. These creatures that came out, but they're trying to make it so normalized in our society, and people are seeing these experiences all around, every day. And the Bible does tell us that in the end, there will be signs in the sky. Like if this isn't signs in the sky, I don't know what is, but it is a growing phenomenon that it's continuing. Does that mean that there's more UFOs now that have been built? Or there's more people running these experiments, or are we just paying attention more, or is this genuinely happening more because they're building up to something that they're about to unleash on the world? And we need to be like aware of what's coming, because there's a metallic one that was also in Vegas that everybody caught from like multiple angles, like 5 different people filmed it. It looked like a giant metal pod just floating, suspended in air, and people were filming from multiple angles, and even a helicopter came by to check it out. And then it like just, I don't know what happened, but apparently it just disappeared. But this stuff is, there is real phenomena that are happening that are UFOs. We just don't know what they are, and it's continuing to grow. This phenomenon is continuing. So it's like they're pushing us towards a narrative that they want you to believe. So what does that mean? It really is like, if they're pushing us all to want to believe something, it almost seems like maybe that's the lie.
Yeah, I think the way I view it, as always, is like, I always like see when you see a story in the news, it's like, it's how is it reported? Because I feel like it's like they're trying to, like, obviously if I wrote something and you wrote something, obviously our biases can't help but bleed over into what you're doing. So they're trying to get you to like get to a certain place when, for years they dismiss all UFO accounts. And like I said, for the longest time in my life, people are crazy who saw UFOs. They were dismissed. They're very fringe things. And so now it's very open that people talk about it. People talk about, like what they said, the Vatican didn't they have like some kind of a conference about how they were going to baptize aliens and stuff like that?
Yeah, they also talked to in the Vatican. They specifically said that if aliens show up, it says that they will, if aliens show up, that they will be the first to maybe potentially baptize them, but they may actually convert us, is what the Vatican claimed. They actually claimed that we may be saved by the aliens' religion. Okay, they even mentioned this. Oh yeah. The Pope talked about how they may need to witness to us if aliens show up.
That sounds satanic.
Oh my gosh. When you hear it, you're like, wait, what? You're like, it's possible that they may need to witness to us.
It's very, so obviously if you go straight scripturally, and I think it's like, is it Hebrews 1 where it's like, Jesus didn't die for the angels. Jesus died for us. So like I said, so if you think about it, if something was an alien that came down, it very likely could be an angel. Well, Jesus didn't die for them, and obviously we don't need to be converted. Obviously, I'm ride or die with Jesus. This is I'm sticking with my God here.
The Vatican also has the large infrared something that they nicknamed Lucifer.
Oh, okay? Right, they have
Lucifer, the largest telescope to see infrared light. Okay, they named it Lucifer, and supposedly they witness UFOs on it all the time.
Isn't there another giant satellite called Satan too? I don't know if it's a satellite dish or something like that. But maybe, yes, like Brian is obviously apt to bring that up, is the fact that, again, we always talk about like that the line, they try to act like that there's these clear lines between science and religion. Honestly, I was going to say this earlier when we were talking about the Nazis, is that like only the way America does religion is everything so compartmentalized. You know what? If you think that church is for Sundays, work is for here, and then we go to the ball game, and then we go to school, and we do all these things. We don't mix politics, religion, and all these things. It's like the people who believe things can't help but let it bleed over into everything they believe. Just like me. Yeah. Just like Brian, where it's like, Brian doesn't stop being a Christian when he goes to work. He doesn't. We don't stop these things.
No,
those people don't either. That's why they name their science programs after their gods. You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah. Now, do you know why they do it? That's why they named their telescope Lucifer. Like the Vatican of all places. Shouldn't they know that name has a meaning to people who believe in Jesus? That, hey, wait a minute, isn't he the bad guy? Well, no, but but that's the interesting thing. When your religion is, when you're really seeking knowledge, Lucifer is the light bearer, light, knowledge, all these things, prophecy, like Apollo, the god Apollo. Like I said, these things are not, coincidences, that these things are all together. And it's like, but again, only how we view things. And that's why it's like, when they even talk about like the Nazis and like the occult, and it's like, oh, well, it just so happens that the Nazis were also into this weird occult stuff. No, that's who they were. So like so all their actions were related to the fact that they believed these things, therefore they did these things. Just like as a Christian, if you believe, therefore you do. And that's what it says. So isn't it interesting, like how it becomes like a faith thing where it's like, That's why Jesus said, I'll know a tree by its fruit. You'll show me what you believe by how you live and what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that's why you can't be a Christian on Sundays when these other people are
Satanists all the day.
they're serving their God every day. And obviously that's what we're supposed to do. But it is interesting. It's like that it is like a lie from the devil. It's like that's how we view things, where it's like, okay, so yeah, like this is school, this is work, this is religion, and this is free time. And we don't, let's not get them mixed up. When really life is like a big spaghetti. You're mixing that thing all together.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's pretty much covers the UFO beginning origins.
Well, anyways, guys, I hope you guys appreciate this episode. Like I said, once again, we're putting more episodes on Rumble, and obviously the episodes that get too spicy for YouTube will be on Rumble. But once again, you can check us out on the audio podcast as well, Apple, Spotify, all the things. But guys, hit us in the comments. Let us know what you want to hear next. But we appreciate you guys. This is JT and Brian signing off. We love you guys.
See you later.
See you next time.